Hello. So, I want to ask a question now of people out there. I've spent a great deal of my life, I suppose, looking at the treatment of men and women in society and comparing that treatment. And in particular, I focused on misandry, which is the hatred of men. And I've regarded the treatment of men as being unfair compared with the treatment of women. And I've addressed this issue in a documentary which I called ManWomanMyth and put it on YouTube. What I'm thinking now is there something that I need to accept? Is there an issue that I need to just deal with and accept? I can't say what prompted my interest in the treatment of men and women in society. But I do have to ask myself now, is there a certain fact that I need to accept? Is it the case that women are accepted by society as being more important than men? Does the phenomenal ability of women to manufacture human beings, to produce humans, does that ability make women more important than men fundamentally? I don't believe that that's the correct way of looking at it. But I have to wonder if that's the way most people see it, and that's the way society sees it. We've always had the expression, for example, women and children first to lifeboats. It's the mentality that seems to place women above men in order of importance. So my question is, are women more important than men fundamentally? And do I need to accept that? So please respond so I can get an idea of what people think.
Is there something men need to accept? That's an interesting question, and one which I believe holds the key to freedom for many men. Both nature and nurture tell us from birth that men are disposable, and women are to be provided for and protected. This is nothing new to men who understand how misandry and gynocentrism work. However, the question remains, is there something we as men need to accept? I believe the answer is yes. Accepting that we as men are deemed to be of less value in the eyes of both men and women is a bitter pill to swallow. One could be forgiven for feeling a sense of low self-worth after this realization, but it needn't be this way. I've always said that we are free to change our attitude to any given situation. It's the last remaining freedom we have in the face of adversity. Being of less value in the eyes of others matters not. The real issue men face is when they agree to serve others, when we allow ourselves to be trodden on and disposed of. That's a choice. It makes us partly to blame for the potential outcomes. We can blame others or tell ourselves that the world should be different and people need to change. But at the end of the day, knowing what we know, we have no excuse for allowing other people to use or abuse us. Accepting our disposability as men is empowering. It gives us the option to walk away. When we walk away, we're soon forgotten, but there's still plenty of other men willing to take our place on the plantation. We need to turn this around. It's a blessing in disguise. It's good to be forgotten. We get to focus on ourselves with fewer distractions. We get to take time to find out what we really like to do and who we are as individuals. We have more time and energy to invest in our passions in life. Are women more important than men? Sure they are, if that's what people want to believe. But when you reduce your thinking down to the one person who matters the most, it becomes unimportant, because you come before anyone else. There's no shame in loving yourself, valuing yourself, and making sure that first and foremost, you as a man come first. You may not be as important in the eyes of others, but that becomes irrelevant when what they think is of little or no consequence to you in everyday life. That said, I believe we do have a duty to wake other men up if they're willing to listen. Man-Woman Myth made the most comprehensive and well-researched documentary series on the subjects of misandry and gynocentrism the manosphere has ever seen. No content creator has ever come close since, because the bar was set so high. It's important for men to understand that because women are valued more highly than men in the eyes of society, we will always get a raw deal. If we're not serving the needs of others, we have no value in their eyes. We can take that as a blow to our self-esteem, or we can see it as a good reason to leave the plantation for good. I'm linking the entire Man-Woman Myth playlist from his channel below. The information was groundbreaking on its first release, and it still holds true to this day. Nothing is changing, men. The conversations regarding men's issues haven't changed in the last 20 years or more, because nobody cares about men. The left is winning on all fronts, and conversations about men's issues are shut down at every opportunity. I made a video several years ago called Male Privilege, highlighting male homelessness, workplace and military deaths, parental alienation, and suicide stats for men. In that video was a clip of a film called The Bridge, showing men jumping from the Golden Gate Bridge. YouTube took that video down, despite the Bridge documentary still being up on YouTube. Their reason? Because it depicted self-harm. Yet when you search self-harm on YouTube, there are pages upon pages of women and girls cutting themselves and claiming to have PTSD, with little or no mention of male self-injury or genuine PTSD. Nobody cares about men killing themselves or the reasons why they do it. Nobody really cares. Only a few of us. Men like us. If you're waiting for things to change, you'll have an eternal wait. Because we have to accept the fact that men are disposable, if we allow ourselves to be. And our only choice at freedom is to walk away. I'll leave you with one of Man-Woman Myth's videos. His new channel is linked below. Please subscribe to him and offer your support if you can. It's the least we can do for a man who dedicated so much of his time to helping men, and he asked for nothing in return. So please feel free to mirror this video and share it wherever you can.
What is happening at the moment is that men are beginning to empower themselves by communicating with each other and discussing issues that concern them as men, as opposed to issues that concern them in other spheres of their lives. Men in the past have tended to discuss issues which do not relate to themselves in terms of themselves as men. They will talk about the economy, they'll talk about the war on drugs, the war in Iraq, they'll talk about everything under the sun except themselves. But what is happening, thanks to the internet and to the growth of the men's movement, is that for the first time, probably in history, certainly in recent history, men are actually talking about their own needs. What we are accustomed to in the Western world is women looking at issues, at all issues which affect them as women, rather than as individuals or as people. Men have failed to do this. And so, for example, if you look at the newspapers, if you look at the way matters are discussed, you will very often find women journalists, women authors, writing about subjects, about issues that concern them as women. You never see men writing about those issues in the same way. But that's now beginning to change. The second reason is that so many men have now become alienated from their own societies for one reason or another, often because, well, perhaps they've lost access to their children, perhaps they've been sent to prison for some trivial offence like smoking cannabis, perhaps they feel alienated because they've been discriminated against in the workplace, where women have been promoted ahead of them simply on the basis of their gender. They've been demonised for 30 years. And it's still the case that, for example, when men are hurt in any way, their suffering isn't taken seriously. And so we will still laugh at Bobbit jokes, which I think shows us just how hated at a very deep level are men. And there's no doubt in my mind that feminism has had a great deal to do with it. And when men wake up to how they have been demonised by the feminist movement, and they understand how this has been achieved, they will fight back. And that's what's happening now.
Do you think that something in the nature of men makes it more difficult for us to work together, for men to work together to achieve, not in terms of general teamwork, but in terms of forming societies like mankind or contributing to this sort of effort?
Yeah,
do you think that something about men makes it more difficult for that to happen than with women and their charities, who seem to be so numerous?
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with that. I find it quite strange with men. If you get them into what I call a military situation where they've got to take orders and all that, I mean, they're unbeatable, because they do work as a band of brothers, you know what I mean? They'll look after each other's back and they will fight as a good team. But it would seem that when it's fighting for women's rights, as when I was down the visitor centre, when I ran that for the first year, and I had this couple came in, and I don't know, she was giving him a bit of a nagging, and this bloke turned around and he says, "There's no doubt about it," he said, "you ever go at a bloke," he said, "he's on his own," he said, "you ever go at a woman," he said, "and she's got the world behind her."
Why do you think men don't see themselves, or haven't up until recently seen themselves as men? They'll see themselves as Muslims or as a part of a religious group or a colour or a race, but never as men themselves.
Because they're not allowed to talk about it. They are in private, but as you probably, I mean, men in private rarely talk about their emotional states, the monosyllabic when they talk about their intimate relationships. But once again, men have not been allowed to air their views, their complaints, their worries in the mainstream media for a long time. And so they haven't developed a consciousness of themselves as men. Women see the way, look at the world in a completely different way than do men. Men externalise the world, if you like. They almost don't see themselves as a part of it. They see the world in terms of statistics, numbers. They see the world in terms of different groupings, blacks, whites. But they don't see themselves as men. They're conscious. They don't have a consciousness of themselves as men. You can see this, for example, well, there are many examples, but one that comes to mind is the fact that they don't look after their health very well. Men tend not to go to the doctors as often as do women, because men are not thinking of themselves. It's something that they're unaccustomed to thinking about. Men have been brought up, at least certainly when I was a lad, brought up to think of just about everything except themselves. And of course, you need men to think in this way if you're going to send them out to do hard, onerous jobs, if you're going to send them out to war. And a man who goes out to war values his country more than his life. And that's how men have been brought up. And women also do very well in making men forget that they are also human beings.
Fathers' movements right the way across the world have never managed to establish themselves as a coherent, powerful source of opposition. Unlike the feminist movement, women are far better than men in networking and organising and working with each other, particularly over emotional issues. Men, I'm afraid, in the dark ages when it comes to this.
So even if they know that a woman is not really quite right in what she's saying, they'll they'll back her because she's a woman. The sisterhood's got to stick together.
Do you think that there were things that men could have done back then, or...
Yes,
what could they
Families
have
Need
done?
Fathers started almost immediately after I opened. And in fact, it was because of Families Need Fathers and men coming to me who were brutalised that I opened a house for men in North London. I think this is very relevant to what we're talking about, because I got the GLC in those days to give me a lovely big house in North London to make provision for men coming in with their children. And I couldn't get any funding from anyone. And the tragedy was that the men, the wealthy men who were willing to put their hands in their pockets to help me with my mothers and children and my refuge in Chiswick, completely ignored and would not cooperate with anything to do with men. Men will not help other men.
Do you have any idea why that is? Is there any easy answer?
I think it's built into the male psyche. Somehow, what is seen or perceived as a weak man, in quotes, who can't take care of himself or take care of his relationship, is a disgrace, and it's almost like it might be catching. When you're dealing with women's violence, whether it be a mob violent rule, like these women, there is an innate part of men that is extremely frightened of women, and they don't deal with them, they run away. Often I've said to a man, the reason that you're so angry with your partner is because you're so dependent on her. And this is often why I think men don't take responsibility for anything to do with this movement. They don't get together, they don't negotiate with lawyers, they don't en masse say, we're not putting up with this.
Do you see that changing at all, or do you think it's just a constant?
I think men have to learn to change. I think women are infinitely malleable and changeable. Maybe it's a biological imperative in women because they create the conditions to have their children safely and to bring them up. But there seems to be, if you put, an example is, when I opened the refuge, it was a 2 up, 2 down outside lavatory, and within a matter of months, there were 56 mothers and children in that tiny place. And to watch them organise it, the feeding, the cooking, the washing, the cleaning, they did it all. I just used to come in and be there. The night I opened the men's house, which was actually a much nicer house in North London, and took in the first men, what the men did, which was so dispiriting, because I was expecting them to do what the women did. They just merely moved themselves into different rooms, shut the doors and refused to come out. They didn't cooperate with each other, they didn't help each other. The only thing they were willing to do was to pick up the phone if it rang so they could give advice.
When it comes to men's groups, unless we was able to form them into a new model army, I think it's very difficult because a lot of them seem to want to do their own thing and work as individuals rather than work as a team. And until men start to work as a team, we're not going to get anywhere. We've got to work as teams.
The reason we're getting very messed up nowadays in terms of gender identity and where we're going, and especially men find it very difficult to know what a man is or what a man should do, is because in letting go of the roles that define our jobs, we've also let go of the roles that define our identity. And if you don't have anything to define your identity, you're going to be lost. That's the basic truth of the matter. So what do you attach your identity to? Usually it's your job. And it kind of goes around, it's a feedback loop. It's your job that defines your identity, which defines what job you get. But that's all up in the air now. We can do whatever job we want. If you want to be a nurse, you can be a nurse. So where do you attach your identity to? Where do you get your identity from? Where does a man get his identity from? My thinking here is that we have to reinvent roles for ourselves. We can't do without roles, because that's what shapes us. We need to know who we are and what we are. So we need to redefine what it means to be a man as distinct from what it means to be a woman. I don't like the term new man, because new man just seems to be defined by what women want in men. And what women say they want in men is very different from what they find attractive in men. So you can't cater your identity to what the opposite gender wants. That's absurd. You've got to find what makes you happy, what gives you strength, completely independent from the opposite sex. in the same way that women have defined what they want and who they are completely distinct from what men have wanted them to be. And we need to now redefine roles that define what it means to be a man. And that's what we're working on. That's what we're working on here. That's an ongoing struggle for me.
Men on the whole feel unhappy unless they have a female partner. I don't believe the same is true with women. Women, yes, like to have a male partner, but by and large they get on very well together. They tend to, their friendships, it seems to be the case that female friendships cater for their emotional needs. Male friendships tend not to touch the emotional needs. Men tend to be involved in, when they're talking, when they're interacting, with something that is outside of themselves, like a game of football, darts, whatever. It isn't the same with women. Women are not as dependent on men emotionally as vice versa, is my belief.
Men are very fearful of women, even in relationships. Men are far more dependent on women, believe it or not, than women are on men. Possibly because a small boy is at his mother's mercy for very many years of his life.
Who do you think is emotionally stronger?
Women are definitely emotionally stronger. There's even been studies, digital psychology, showing that after a breakup, well, they study divorces, but say a breakup, that women get over it on average in a matter of months, about 3 months. Men take about 3 years.
2 to 3 hours.
No, I think,
it looks like that.
Again, I'm coming from experience,
months.
and it would seem as though women would get over it.
They get over it a lot faster than men do. Which is a total lie, the whole lie to the idea that, men are kind of completely insensitive and we don't care.
Stone cold, Steve Austin type.
We're not, actually, we have feelings, do you know what I mean?
In fact, it's the opposite. Women are the stone cold ones.
So why is it we think that women are so sensitive and vulnerable emotionally? And it's actually
because
men
they're mothers.
probably.
They're our mothers. We're not talking about women, we're talking about our mothers. That's what we do when we talk kind of all this stuff about kind of the sensitivity of women and the goodness and the innocence. We're talking about our mums. We're plainly not talking about our girlfriends.
What do you mean by we're talking about our mums? What's your
We're
point?
talking about our experience of women from the experience of our mothers. So
we're not looking
in
at
terms
it
of caring, in
reality,
terms of we're looking at it from the point of view of a little child being cared for by this perfect mother, and that's our idea of women. That's when we talk about women. That's what we talk about.
Well, I don't.
But then you go beyond that, and you go beyond that. And you start talking about the women in terms of the women that we've known, and they turn out to be stone cold, over in and out. Jesus.
So how come your mother's the complete opposite to that then?
I don't know, because you are a son.
So basically, you feel you owe them your life, and so that's it. You pretty much. There's nothing they can do wrong.
Well,
Hey, well, they're the ones caring for you, and you're only a child at that point.
I think my mother's the only woman that hasn't hurt me, actually. Well, she physically beat me, but, that's...
Yeah, well, same here.
Yeah, but that's okay.
That's cultural.
Hey, so I'm thinking a lot, and one of the things I'm thinking is that I want to be communicating more. I want to be talking more to people. Now, I'm a friendly guy, and I'm quite chatty, and I suppose the problem is that I haven't got a lot to say because I'm not doing very much in life now. But despite that, I still want to be in touch with people more than I am. I have some conversations with people, but not very often, and they're really good. It's really cool to be in touch. So I want to get that going more. So this is to ask people to contact me, if you can. I can do it verbally or in text. I'm not fussed, but I definitely want to be communicating more. So try and make that happen, and I can talk about anything you like. Physics, chemistry, the universe, archaeology. The list of subjects is limitless that I want to talk about. So hit me back when you can. Thank you. That's if I can stop this video. It's not easy.